Did you ever wonder what it was like to walk through the streets of ancient Rome? Imagine this. You're strolling through the busy city, hearing the sounds of carts, people chatting, and the hustle of Roman life. Suddenly, you're invited to the biggest party in town. As you approach a huge villa, the smell of roasted meat and sweet spices fills the air. Torches light up the marble statues, and inside, there's not just food, there's music, games, and even a little drama. What was it like to party with the Romans? Let's find out together. But tonight, you're not just here to eat. You're here to experience something far beyond a simple meal. This is no ordinary dinner party. It's a convivium, a Roman feast where the wealthy and powerful come to showcase their status, and where every dish, drink, and entertainment is carefully designed to impress. The stakes are high. Romans were known for going all out during their banquets, lavish spreads of food, bizarre and rare delicacies, and even live entertainment like musicians, acrobats, and, on some occasions, gladiatorial fights. But beneath all the luxury lay deep traditions, ceremonies, and even sacrifices that carried intense meaning for the Romans. By the end of this video, you'll understand that Roman feasts were much more than just meals. They were grand performances, a symbol of power, and a reflection of their intricate relationship with the gods. You'll also discover how some of their rituals and traditions were downright shocking. So stay tuned, because what you're about to hear will transport you back to the glory days of the Roman Empire. Trust me, you won't want to miss the wildest and most unexpected parts of these epic parties. The Roman dining experience, the food. Let's start with the food, because for the Romans, what was served on the table was nothing short of a spectacle. Imagine walking into a Roman banquet and seeing dishes you've never even heard of before. Dishes you probably wouldn't find anywhere else in the world. The wealthy elite took pride in serving rare and exotic foods that would leave their guests in awe. These weren't your average bread and cheese affairs. Oh no, they took it to the next level. But have you ever wondered how they ate all of that? Did they use forks and spoons like we do today? Well, here's something interesting. The main utensil Romans used was the spoon. That's right, no fancy silverware sets. But here's the thing, they also used their hands a lot, especially for bread and other easily picked up foods. Occasionally, they'd pull out a knife or a tool similar to a fork to cut or spear a piece of food. But it wasn't common practice like it is now. It makes you wonder, how messy did things get during those huge banquets? Imagine attending a Roman feast today and forgetting to wash your hands before the meal. Oops! But utensils were only part of the story. The way food was prepared, served, and even the rituals surrounding meals showed how much value Romans placed on their gatherings. Take peacock, for example. Yes, peacock. The bird was often roasted whole and served with its colorful feathers reattached for a stunning display. Guests would feast their eyes before even tasting the food. But if you thought that was extravagant, wait until you hear this. Stuffed dormice, these tiny rodents stuffed with spiced nuts, were considered a luxurious snack. Now, if that's not wild enough, they also ate flamingo tongues and jellyfish. Flamingo tongues were considered a delicacy because of their rarity and flavor. And jellyfish. It wasn't exactly a popular item, but the wealthy would go to great lengths to find and serve something unusual. But it wasn't all exotic. Romans also enjoyed more familiar foods such as bread, cheese, fish, and fruits. Freshly baked bread, from grain ground by hand, was often the staple for most citizens, but the rich could afford imported fruits like figs, dates, and grapes, which made their way from the far corners of the empire. One key element of a Roman banquet was that the meals were often elaborately prepared and sometimes even covered in gold leaf. Yep, Romans loved to flaunt their wealth with edible gold. They believed the beauty and presentation of food were just as important as the taste. These feasts weren't rushed. In fact, they were structured events that could last for hours. A typical Roman banquet started with gustaccio, the appetizer course. This might include eggs, olives, or light salads, served with a strong mulsum, a sweetened wine that whetted the appetite. Next came the prima mensa, the main course. This was where the more exotic meats like roasted boar, beef, and fish dishes took center stage. But the Romans didn't stop there. They often prepared the meat in sauces made from spices like cinnamon, pepper, and cumin, imported from as far as India. Wealthy Romans loved to experiment with flavors, blending sweet and savory ingredients like honey, vinegar, and garum, a fermented fish sauce that was an absolute must for Roman cooks. And then the grand finale, the secunda mensa, or dessert. Fruits like apples, figs, and dates were served alongside cakes drizzled with honey. Sweet treats made from almonds, raisins, and even cheeses were common on the dessert table. And here's a fun fact. Ever heard of the vomitorium? Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't a room where people went to, well, vomit. A vomitorium was simply the name for the passageways in Roman theaters where people could exit quickly. However, it's true that some Romans would overindulge at these feasts and excuse themselves when they needed to. Make room for more. Can you imagine attending a dinner party today and someone excusing themselves for a quick reset just so they could keep eating? What would you even say? No Roman banquet was complete without plenty of wine. But Roman wine was different from what we know today. It was strong, sometimes too strong to drink on its own. So the Romans mixed their wine with water, often adding herbs, honey, or spices to improve the flavor. Drinking pure wine was considered barbaric, but that didn't mean Romans weren't drinking a lot. They'd sip their wine from elegant goblets, sometimes drinking so much that things would get a little wild. As the wine flowed, the entertainment began. Roman parties were lively, with a full roster of musicians playing instruments like lutes, harps, and flutes. But for the Romans, music was just the beginning. Acrobats, jugglers, and even fire eaters were brought in to entertain guests. And if the host was feeling particularly ambitious, there might be live performances by poets or actors, or in some cases, gladiators would engage in combat right in the host's courtyard. Imagine a sword fight happening while you're lounging on a couch, sipping watered-down wine. Talk about entertainment, but not everything was just for fun. Sometimes Roman parties took a darker turn. At the height of the festivities, the mood could suddenly shift because this was the moment when Romans made their offerings to the gods. What happened next? Let's find out. The rituals and sacrifices. In Roman culture, even the grandest feast wasn't just about indulgence. It was often tied to something much more important, sacrificium, or sacrifice. Romans believed in keeping the gods happy, and part of that meant making regular offerings to them. During these banquets, a portion of the food might be set aside and offered as a gift to the gods. But in more serious cases, an actual animal, usually a pig, bull, or sheep, would be sacrificed in the villa's courtyard or at a nearby temple. This ritual wasn't just ceremonial. It was believed to bring good fortune and protect the household from misfortune. It's important to remember that for the Romans, these sacrifices weren't taken lightly. If something went wrong during the sacrifice, say the animal didn't fall the right way, it could be seen as a bad omen. And that could spell disaster for the entire party. The host might even be considered cursed if the sacrifice wasn't accepted by the gods. Imagine the fear and tension hanging in the air if a sacrifice didn't go as planned. People whispering, wondering if this meant that the gods were angry. But not every Roman party ended in a dramatic ritual. Sometimes after the feasting and sacrifices, the guests would simply relax. Baths were a popular way to unwind after a meal, or they might gather to chat, debate politics, or share gossip. Remember, these parties weren't just for fun. They were where the wealthy made deals, strengthened alliances, and even plotted political moves. Makes you wonder if they ever had to sacrifice a really bad dish to the gods. Sorry, Jupiter, the peacock didn't turn out right. Let's offer it to you instead. For many Romans, these grand feasts weren't just about the food. They were about who you were eating with and how you presented yourself. Banquets became an important opportunity to network, build alliances, and showcase your status. These gatherings allowed politicians, wealthy merchants, and prominent citizens to flex their social muscles. If you weren't at the right table or hosting the grandest party in town, you risked being forgotten by the elite. The dining room itself, called the triclinium, was designed to emphasize social hierarchy. It had 3 couches where guests would recline instead of sitting. That's right, Romans ate lying down, and not just anywhere. The most important guest, known as the Rex Convivii, or king of the banquet, got the best spot. Imagine reclining on plush cushions while your less important guests sat further away, struggling for your attention. And there was a lot to talk about. Feasts often sparked discussions about politics, philosophy, and of course, gossip. But don't forget Romans were also competitive. If you could host a bigger and better party than your rival, you gained serious bragging rights. It wasn't just about eating, it was about power plays, status, and making sure everyone left knowing just how important you were. But the night was far from over. After all the eating and drinking, the real fun began. Let's go into the world of Roman games and entertainment, where things often got a little wild. After the food was eaten and the wine had been generously poured, Romans knew how to keep the energy high. If you thought the banquet itself was extravagant, wait until you hear about the games that followed. Romans loved to play games of chance and skill, from board games like La Trunculi, kind of like chess, to gambling with dice, which could get pretty intense. As the night wore on, the entertainment became more elaborate. Musicians with lyres and flutes would serenade the crowd, and sometimes the host would hire dancers to perform rhythmic routines. And, as I mentioned earlier, more ambitious hosts would even have gladiatorial games in their courtyards. Imagine seeing fierce fighters clashing right next to the dinner table. There's nothing like a bit of danger to spice up your evening, right? But there was more than just fighting. Some parties had elaborate plays performed by actors or mimes who would entertain with comedies and parodies of daily life. There were also times when guests themselves would get involved in the entertainment. Imagine being roped into acting out a funny scene in front of the other guests. Now let me ask you, can you imagine being invited to one of these Roman feasts? Would you be sitting back and enjoying the show, or would you jump in and join the games and entertainment? As the evening wound down and the guests started to feel the effects of all the food and drink, Romans didn't just head home and crash like we might after a big party. They had an entirely different approach to unwinding. Before heading home, many Romans would visit the public baths, an essential part of socializing in Roman culture. The baths weren't just for cleaning up, they were places to relax, chat, and even strike deals. People of all social classes would gather at these vast bathhouses to soak in hot water, enjoy massages, and discuss the latest political drama or business ventures. For many Romans, the bathhouse was as much a part of social life as the feasts themselves. These bathhouses weren't just basic pools either. They were massive, beautifully designed complexes with hot, warm, and cold rooms, often adorned with marble, mosaics, and sculptures. It was a luxurious way to end the evening. I have provided a detailed history of Roman baths in another video, which you can watch out for more information. The role of religion and sacrifice in Roman social life. But there was one more important aspect to Roman feasts, one that wasn't just about food or fun. For the Romans, the gods played a central role in everything they did, and their parties were no exception. What did they do to make sure the gods were always on their side? Let's take a look. The gods were always present in Roman life, even at their most extravagant banquets. Feasts were often held in honor of particular gods, and no gathering was complete without a ritual offering. These offerings were called libations, where wine or food was poured out as a gift to the gods in thanks for their blessings. But that wasn't all. Sometimes hosts would make animal sacrifices during the festivities. These sacrifices were typically reserved for more formal occasions, religious holidays, or when a powerful person wanted to seek favor from the gods for a big endeavor, like a political campaign or military conquest. The ritual would begin with a priest blessing the animal, often a pig, sheep, or bull, while chanting prayers to the gods. The animal was then sacrificed, and parts of it were burned as an offering. The rest would be cooked and served to the guests, symbolizing the shared meal with the gods. It was believed that by honoring the gods in this way, the host and the guests would receive blessings of health, wealth, and success. These sacrifices weren't just for small dinner parties. Rome had grand public festivals where entire communities would come together to celebrate the gods. Saturnalia, for example, was one of the most famous festivals, held in honor of the god Saturn. During this time, the roles of society were reversed. Slaves dined with their masters, and everyone took part in games, drinking, and feasting. It was a time of joy and celebration, but it also reminded Romans that the gods were watching over them. expecting respect and gratitude. So, what can we learn from these Roman parties and feasts? Well, they weren't just about luxury or showing off wealth. They were about creating connections between people, communities, and the gods. The food, the games, the entertainment, and even the sacrifices all served to strengthen bonds and build networks. The legacy of Roman feasts can still be felt today in how we celebrate, gather, and share meals. From dinner parties to holiday feasts, we continue to bring people together around food, conversation, and entertainment, just like the Romans did over 2,000 years ago. If you've enjoyed this journey back in time and want to discover more fascinating stories from ancient civilizations, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And hey, maybe next time you sit down for a big meal, you'll appreciate that we've moved past peacock and flamingo tongues. But who knows, maybe your next dinner party will have a little more Roman flair. Until next time, keep exploring the past, and remember, history is always more exciting when you experience it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.